Okay, so I'll be real. I graduated college in 5 years, not four. And I'm not ashamed of that whatsoever. During my time in college, I was really lucky and fortunate, and I worked hard to be able to work at four different companies. Today, I want to share a major tip or fail from each one of those internships or co ops in hopes to just help you on your journey on your internships. So, if you're interning this summer or if you have an internship on the way, I hope that this perspective and my experiences will help you not do some of the things that I did, or maybe do some of the things that I did. So let's get into it. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. And if it's your first time, welcome to my channel. I make videos about career, tech, and mindset. I had the opportunity to work as an engineer for several years at Tesla, designing sensors, and now I'm doing some other stuff. But in addition to that, I'm making videos to share some of my experiences, my insight, and perspective about my journey. So I invite you to subscribe if you're interested in that. Today, I want to talk about my journey, specifically in some of my internships and co-ops. So internships, I denote that as like summertime, and co-ops, that's either something in the fall or winter time, really just like the off season, or just like a longer duration internship. So I did 2 internships and 2 co-ops when I was in college. And like I said, I graduated in 5 years, not ashamed, actually kind of proud, because I was able to make a pretty solid resume before I graduated. During that time and really all of those experiences, I did some pretty interesting things at those internships. And so I really want to talk and be really open and transparent about some of the major W's and some of the L's that I experienced during that time, in hopes that you could capitalize on some of these insights or don't ever do some of these things. And the goal for this video is to help you get that perspective to really just capitalize on whatever experiences you have, or just better position yourself for success on the job, or to get that return offer, or to get that like full-time offer. So my first co-op was actually with Marathon Petroleum in Findlay, Ohio. So Marathon Petroleum is really kind of like the downstream version of Marathon Oil Company. So Marathon Oil Company extracts oil from the ground. Marathon Petroleum does all of the processing and essentially the distribution of the oil. Speaking of the distribution, I thought it was kind of fascinating. I didn't know this until I worked there, but there's thousands of miles of underground pipes transporting oil. And so I'll show you guys a map to see what it looks like. But I thought it was pretty interesting and something I never thought about before. But yeah, it's pretty cool how there's like so many miles of underground pipes for oil kind of existing. Even if you're like pro oil, I don't know, you can't be against oil because it's still kind of necessary, but I'm like pro sustainability. So there is that. So when I started off at Marathon, my mentor / manager sat me aside and said, "Hey, what do you want to work on?" And he offered kind of a project management opportunity to work at different pipeline stations and ensure different like maintenance projects got executed. And that was fine, but it really wasn't towards my bigger picture goal, which was just learning and submerging myself in sustainable technologies. I said, "Hey, I really want to do sustainability. Does this company have any opportunities that I can do that?" They didn't really, but we got creative and we came up with a lighting project. So I was essentially responsible for going to different gas stations and pipeline stations to evaluate their lights to see how much energy they would output, and also like how good they would illuminate a space. So it was a pretty cool research project to understand illumination levels in different environments. But it was also cool because I was able to like look at the different light bulbs and light fixtures and say like, all of these suck. And to give you guys a little bit more context on the timing, this was like early 2011. And so there was a lot of incandescent bulbs, a lot of halogen bulbs. And I just knew that there was something better. We all know now as like compact fluorescent lights, or CFLs, or LEDs. Again, this is like 10 years ago. At the time, these were really expensive, but they would last like 50,000 hours or 60,000 hours, as opposed to like incandescent light bulbs, which would last like 10,000 hours, if I remember correctly. I basically created like this, I use this CAD software to like mock up and display how the different gas stations could like lay out the lights and how much cost savings it would save after like 10 years. And really like the horizon was that long because again, the initial price was so high. Okay, I don't want to go too deep into the details, but that's a lot about what I did at that first internship. And what was really cool about that experience was I got to do something related to a space I cared about at the company. So the lesson that I want to share with you guys here is take ownership in the work and the projects that you do. I think a lot of times when we start at internships, we kind of just get work thrown at us and we have to just execute that. And that's kind of like the minimum. You're going to be told to do something. But in addition to that, it's a great opportunity to speak up and request work that will help you build that expertise or gain that exposure in a different space. So for me, I really wanted to learn more about sustainable applications and thinking about efficiency and cost savings. And so I got to do a project related to that. So my first internship was with Shell, and that was the next summer. So this is summer 2012 in Houston, Texas. When I was at Shell, I was put on the subsea controls team, and I found a cool picture that kind of shows it. But you can think of the subsea controls team as literally the team that designs the electronics that sit at the sea floor, which I think is pretty cool and requires a lot of nuance and design and really a lot of like validation. Because again, it's underwater. So like the IP rating, I don't even know what it is, but I can imagine it's very difficult to like ensure that it can survive at that like levels of depth. The interesting thing about my Shell experience, and this is just me being transparent, is I never really have much to offer when it comes to sharing about this experience. And truthfully, that's because I didn't do really well. I didn't get a good project. It was like a low value project, and I just didn't learn too much as like an engineer, and it was more of exposure, and I didn't really get to the higher levels of really contributing or creating impact. But there was one scenario that really stuck out to me, which was really a big lesson learned. So the situation was they invited the interns out to a baseball game, the Houston Astros. And so I got to go to a baseball game, and we ended up like having snacks, having food. I ended up having a hot dog, did not go well. So I ended up leaving early. And I sent an email to the person the following day, basically saying like, hey, couldn't stay around for the pictures, didn't feel well, had to go. They responded basically saying like they didn't like my tone in the email. I didn't know that I had a tone in the email. So I ended up following up with a phone call to ensure that there was no ambiguity and like my messaging to kind of apologize. The damage was done from the email and I couldn't get back from it. And honestly, to this day, I don't really know exactly what I did, but what I did learn from that situation was take a step back when you're sending messages, review it, especially if it's like to someone higher up or if it's going to have a lot of visibility or exposure. It's like be thoughtful in your communication, but also make sure that you review it for tone and things like that. It's not their fault. It's not your fault, but it's just like the limitations of like text or just words in themselves. Make sure you're using at least neutral or positive language within an email. Again, I don't fully know what I did wrong. This is now like 9 years ago, and it's pretty hard to recall that exact exchange, but I understood, and the lesson I learned was if I type an email and I'm not sure, maybe just like sit on it for a little bit, come back and review it later, and then press send instead of just like typing a message and pressing send. I share this story with you because I don't want you to go through that. It was really whack. My second co-op, which was my third work experience, was at Toyota in Saline, Michigan. And so I was put on a really cool team, the ES3 team, Electronic Systems 3, which was like an advanced engineering, which advanced engineering does not, to me, sound like what it actually is, but advanced engineering isn't like the higher level of engineering. It's actually like the earlier stages in a product's development. So at the time, I was working on the cockpit electronics. And to put this into context, this is 2013. I got to go to like the NAIAS, the North American International Auto Show in Detroit. And it's a really big car show. And I got to like benchmark a bunch of cars, which is really just like fancy language for I got to look at a bunch of cars and take pictures of them and like see what I liked about them. I think I got to see a Tesla. I can't remember, but I feel like I did. But it was definitely like a car that I benchmarked heavily. Within my project, I got to recommend different technology for the cockpit. And so if you guys don't know, the cockpit, you can think of it as like the driver's seat, you have your tachometer, which is like the display directly behind the steering wheel. And then you also have like your center display, and that's like what your HVAC controls and just like all of your infotainment sits at. And so I got to work on what would be those pieces and like how would they look and what would the layout be? And so I got to recommend some really cool stuff. And again, this is 2013, and it ended up getting put into the Toyota in like 2017 or 2018, something around that time frame. I recommended like a head-up display, and the head-up display would provide like a little bit of information like your speed or like the direction if you have your turn signal on, or maybe like some GPS direction, so like turn left or something like that. And then I really wanted to recommend, I did recommend like put an entire like 17-inch display like the Tesla had again in 2013. I was like, put a huge display, make it touchscreen, and call it a day. Toyota didn't follow that. And the fact that they did something eerily close, I guess, is still pretty cool. Like, I won't say like these were all of my ideas that they just like took and ran with. It was like they were already kind of thinking of this stuff anyway. And the lesson here is, like I mentioned, I got to go to NAIAS and I got to benchmark a bunch of different cars. And what I learned was the first level of an opportunity is exposure. And so I had a little bit of contributions to the company, but what I think I did a great job at is really building a lot of exposure to the kind of advanced engineering development that was taking place. So I got to learn so much from my peers, so much from my mentor, and really understand like how they go about scoping different aspects of a car at the earliest stage. And so that was really cool. I even got to benchmark and evaluate the RAV4. It was like a new body style before it even came out to the public. And so it was really cool to be able to have that experience, exposure. And so I really cherish that. So if you're an intern, my tip for you then would be like, see everything you can. Like, you're inside the walls that you've always kind of like talked about getting inside of. Capitalize on that. Like, learn as much as you can, see as much as you can, really just like dabble into so many different things. This is the best time to do it, like, quite frankly. And you don't want to miss that opportunity and then leave and then say like, dang, I wish I actually learned about what they did in this space, right? Okay, so my last internship, which was my fourth work experience, was with Chrysler, and this was in Auburn Hills, Michigan. So I got to work on advanced supplier quality, similar to advanced engineering. In this sense, it's like the early stages of validating. Actually, I don't know why it's called advanced, if I'm being honest. Like, it should just be called supplier quality, because that's what it was. I guess it was pre-production. So yeah, it's pre-production. That's why. So yeah, I got to work on supplier quality, which meant I got to go to suppliers and essentially audit them. There's like a funny office clip where like Toby's interviewing this guy. He's basically like, I'm just a glorified fact checker. I'm not saying that's what supplier quality is, but that's kind of how I felt, because I was just like checking off boxes at some point. It's a really cool experience. And essentially we have to get every OEM, original equipment manufacturer, has to do this process where you have to PPAP, which is, I wrote it down, production part approval process, which means you have to like make sure that it passes all of these like certification type things to ensure that you will be able to meet the yield requirements to a certain level of quality to make a bunch of cars. I got to go to a bunch of different suppliers to ensure that they would pass the PPAP process. And that was really, really cool. But it was kind of a difficult experience just because I was going to these different suppliers and kind of just like, oh, you should do this on your line, or hey, have you tried this? And I'm just like throwing out ideas and really trying to contribute in this space. But where I faltered was I didn't get a good alignment with my manager, or at least it didn't sink in to understand what my fundamental job was. I think that sometimes as an intern, you get caught up in saying like, I just want to do a bunch of different things. I just want to go out, learn about these different things. And that's what I was doing by going to different suppliers, which is learning, signing off on different things, or different processes, I should say. But I don't think I did a really good job at doing my fundamental job. And what that meant was my review didn't go as well as I hoped. Right. So at the end of my internship, I sat down with my manager and he said, hey, I expected you to do X, Y, Z, but you didn't execute all of these things. But I did have good things that I executed, so it kind of worked out. For him being my manager, my job was to follow his directives and execute those things. So my lesson learned here was get an alignment with your manager on day one or week one if you can't get it on the first day, because that's what's going to really guide and be used as the metrics of success for your internship. You can do all of this awesome work, but if it's not aligned or really an expectation with your manager, it could be for naught, meaning it could be for no actual value, or yeah, it just could be wasted. Make sure you get alignment because that was a really tough situation to navigate from. Yeah, I don't want you guys to go through that. I appreciate you guys watching. Again, I'm just sharing some of my experiences, my four different work experiences before I graduated college. And I know I didn't even talk about how I got these different internships or different co-ops. So if you're interested in seeing that, throw a comment below and say like, hey, could you tell me how you got this internship or this co-op? Because I'd be happy to make another video if you guys are interested to talk about that in more detail. But if you rock with me all the way through, I truly appreciate you staying, watching, and engaging. And so I just want to say have a dope day and thank you for watching. Subscribe. All right. Have a dope day. Peace.